Welcome to SciTech Culture with Steve Kern and Ben Warner, where we examine science, technology and culture in the 21st century. Visit our website at scitechculture.com. At the risk of sounding too much like a Star Trek The Next Generation tragic here, I've actually rewatched Picard Season 3 again. And I only mentioned this at the top of of our episode today, Steve, because had this revelation that not only was it better the second time round, but if you are going to watch it and you are a fan of the show and you haven't seen it, my recommendation is to try and watch it as much in one go as possible. So it's a bit of a stretch, it's 10 episodes, so 10 hours. So, break it up into maybe 2, 3 or 4 chunks of episodes. And there are actually ways you can do it. Episodes 1 to 4 is a good chunk. 5 to 7 is a good chunk, and 8 to 10 is a good chunk in terms of that. But if you try to watch them as close together as possible, it actually works more like a film, and you get the hit of the moments a lot better because you've watched it all in that one go. The difference, I guess, the first time around when I watched it was that I only saw it one episode a week, which might work for most normal TV, but because it's more like a film, that interruption was a bit jarring in that sense. And of course, the other thing is the first time around, I had this anxiety in the back of my mind that at some point they were going to screw it up. And when they didn't, you have the pleasure of knowing that they haven't screwed it up the second time around.
Oh, well, that's good news, Ben. And as we said last week, it sounds like, now the quality of content, not necessarily for film or theatrical release, is obviously every bit as good. And that's it's awesome to hear that the series is fantastic and good enough to watch twice.
Absolutely. All right, let's delve into our topics today, and we're revisiting Elon Musk's Starship attempts, his SpaceX rockets, and of course there was the infamous one the other week where it got into the air, but it exploded a couple of minutes after leaving the launch pad. With the idea being that it was still a success because it didn't blow up the launch pad in this particular case. Sort of mention it as, he's got that sort of approach of, we're just going to keep doing it. And even if we fail, that there is no failure because we learn something from each failure. And it's kind of like breaking things and moving fast or something like that in terms of the approach. Obviously, no people were affected by it. That'd be a bit of a concern. But do you have any? I know we've spoken about Elon's attempts here with SpaceX a couple of times, but is there anything of particular interest in this specific example that sort of hit you? Or
oh yeah, look, absolutely. There's the attitude that this was a success. And I'm not saying it isn't. I mean, it was I believe, a controlled random disassembly or whatever they described it as of the spacecraft, and it was 3 to 4 minutes into basically the launch program. So obviously they lost control. I think there was a problem or a failure to separate correctly, and knowing that they'd lose control of the rocket, they blew it up. And but I agree with Elon. What's to say it isn't a success? There's no loss of life. They'll learn a whole lot from the data and they'll build something better. What is really interesting about this story is just contrast it to 50 years ago. Imagine if this happened with a NASA rocket. Imagine if this even happened with a NASA rocket today. It'd probably be 3 years before they did the next launch anyway. By the time they went through everything, revised everything, had press conferences to apologise, etc., and, found someone to point a finger at and, whatever else. And instead, what we have is, Elon proclaiming it as success, and saying, well, we'll be putting another one up in 2 to 3 months. I think it's fantastic. And I think it's that shift in thinking and that shift in approach, and no longer fearing failure. And maybe that's because we're not in the middle of a space race like we were 50 years ago. It is a success. We'll have learned, and, that new rocket, well, the next one they put up, will be a stepping stone to a truly heavy launch vehicle.
Mm-hmm. And probably a good example of why, getting the private sector involved kind of defers the the tension around that kind of thing, where like if it was only NASA, like you said, it would be a concern, but with multiple different parties with different types of approaches and agendas to it, even though the outcome is meant to be the same, it can actually change the narrative around how these things progress, I guess.
Yeah, look, it's amazing. I mean, if you really look at the Orion, which NASA is about to start using, it's essentially an extension of the Apollo program. Of course, it's a much improved rocket, but at its heart, it's something that has been tried and tested, a long time ago. So there's nothing new there. The SpaceX approach truly is new. And that's why it is a true heavy lift rocket that will be able to lift payloads far in excess of anything we've ever seen before. And that's what's exciting about it. And to be able to do that, you have to invent something completely new from the ground up, new systems, new ideas and innovation. And they're doing it. And that's where I agree with Elon, that this is a success. It got off the pad. It got 3, I think, minutes into the launch sequence, and they were able to end the launch as they chose. So they had control over the whole thing. They'll have data from the whole thing, and they'll have learned a whole lot from it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in terms of falling back down to earth, we'll move on to our next topic, and PC sales drops this year, and the hand wringing let that commence. I thought this was funny. There was the PC laptops had 30% declines, and everyone was taking a whack at Apple for having a 40% decline in MacBook sales. I don't think they're hurting too much, to be perfectly honest. But what I thought was funny about this was obviously the pandemic accelerated the need, or the perceived need, for people to purchase more computer equipment, laptops being the classic example of that, because of remote work and all that sort of thing. And I don't really understand why, even though they're making a ton of money still on all of this stuff, that they can spin this into a negative headline just because it's an effect of coming out of the pandemic and people probably not needing these laptops anymore, or even if they needed them in the first place. And that's the part that I find funny about this particular thing. And then by next year it'll probably balance itself out and have been forgotten. So it just, clickbait headline, I don't know, but it's kind of a bit more sensationalized than it needs to be, because none of these companies are hurting in that respect.
Oh, no, you're absolutely right. I doubt any of them would be hurting. Look, just from an Apple perspective, if you went out and bought an M1 MacBook like I did, hey, you might not be buying another M2 or something this year because you're so happy with the laptop that you've got. You're not suffering any dissatisfaction. You just don't need to buy again so soon. And I tell you what, the quality of the M1 that I've got, which is a 2020 M1, I can see it like being good for me for another 3-4 years minimum. So that would take me through to 2026, 2027. And that then would be buying early or replacing a laptop early for me, considering I've got about 12 years out of my last one. So you can see that if I was to upgrade after 6 or 7 years, that's going to bump up Apple's sales. But more seriously, across the board, look, everyone went out and bought themselves something new because there wasn't anything else to look at during COVID except what was sitting in your lap. And I think, now, and we've said this now for a number of years, pretty much any PC you get, even if it is stuck with an Intel chip, generally has the power and the ability to do whatever it is you need it to do. And therefore, there's no rush to go out and get another one.
And it's a testament also to longevity, even on the PC side. Macs have always had the the longevity thing down. But PCs are kind of sitting that way as well. My Dell laptop that I use for work is now 4 years old, and it's showing no signs of falling over. And even the battery life, you would think on a Dell laptop by this point would be getting a bit average, but it's still fine in terms of that. So, there's only so many of these things we can buy on a regular basis. Let's put it that way.
That's right. And I mean, who knows? Maybe iPad sales are going through the roof.
All right. And so our last topic, something a little bit different. We haven't, I don't think we've sort of touched on this before, but I was watching an episode of Foreign Correspondent, which was dealing with how North Korean defectors are actually treated in South Korea, and also what their experience is like after they've defected and escaped the regime. And there was one component of this where a South Korean television show has actually it's kind of poking fun at the regime by interviewing defectors and sort of bringing to light the kind of life that you can expect being in North Korea, which is obviously not great at all. And and it's called Now on My Way to Meet You, and it's featuring stories about defectors who had made a new life in South Korea. So the reason why I wanted to touch on this is that apart from the fact that there are, sort of documentaries and stories that you can find about North Korea defectors, all that sort of thing online, there's plenty of that. But this was a particularly different angle, only because it chose to focus on how North Korean defectors are actually perceived by South Koreans after they've lived there, and that although there may be an improvement in some ways because they've escaped the oppression of the regime, they face a range of other challenges once they get to South Korea, and it's harder for them to integrate than what it might appear, because there might be some natural suspicion on the local populace about, are they really a defector, or is something else going on here?
Yeah, look, I think it must be very difficult to defect even from your worst circumstance in a country which is ruled in the way that North Korea is. But it's a brave step to take. These are people who are willing to leave behind what they know and move into the unknown. And I think that's what is interesting about this show, and the way that it depicts people that make the transition from North Korea to South Korea. I mean, you can well imagine that if you spent 20 years, maybe longer, 30, living under oppression, then you'd come to the South, and even though everyone perceives you to have freedom, in your own mind there might be a lot of things that you can never quite get your head around. And let's face it, South Korea is a very different place to North Korea. And then on top of that, as you've just pointed out, there's people's attitudes. So this is a really interesting look at culture, and also I think the technology aspect, because that's a big part of, I guess, the Western or advanced sort of democracies, is how these things are perceived, how this information's passed around. And, of course, that sort of visibility or interaction of society through social and indeed just digital sort of apps, is something that you probably wouldn't have in North Korea. So at the very least, anyone who comes across that border has a lot of catching up to do, and a lot of work to do mentally and emotionally to integrate as well.
And I guess the other interesting aspect for me was this focus on younger people getting more access to what would be considered contraband material in North Korea. So the idea that, for instance, just something as simple as a soap opera that's on TV that would be, cheesy for us to watch or whatever, that's a window into, and it's actually mentioned, it was actually mentioned in this documentary that they can be actually a window into life in the West, or even, in many other countries. And that's actually a mind-blowing experience for them, and that more and more are getting access. And again, it might be a technology thing, whatever, or they're slipping on banning this sort of stuff, but having access to that material, can lead more and more to do this, which, it might be an interesting challenge. There is a reference there that Kim Jong-un is actually watching this particular show that we mentioned before, for obvious reasons, because, from his perspective, I'm sure it's a national security threat.
Oh, yeah, look, I'm sure it is. You make an interesting point, the fact that they can't block, a lot of the sort of, more popular culture aspects. And, these things do give us a window into the world. I mean, just imagine for me what it was like to go to California and find out Bold and Beautiful actually was real. And I guess for everyone in North Korea that gets their hands on a copy of a soap opera that depicts life somewhere else where everyone's glamorous and happy, and apart from the challenges in their life that come up every day, it's an insight into a world that at least resembles maybe what the world is like on this side of the border. And I think that those sorts of things, must really trouble the regime in North Korea.
Absolutely. So if you haven't already, I encourage you to check out that Foreign Correspondent episode. It's on ABC In Depth, I think the YouTube channel's called. Well worth checking out. All right, Steve, we might wrap it up there. And no, I'm not going to go watch Star Trek Picard again, but maybe I will at some point in the future. And highly recommend for all you Next Generation fans out there, make sure you see it. You won't be disappointed.
I reckon you're right on there.
Absolutely. All right, so don't forget to check out our website, SciTechCulture.com. You can get all of our links and content there. You can subscribe to our YouTube and Vimeo channels, our RSS feeds, and watch us on any and all of your devices. And we greatly appreciate your visits to our website. All right, so that's it for this episode. We'll catch you next time.